So I've been playing Overwatch a lot this season, probably because of, honestly, the Overwatch League. That's a really interesting thing to watch. But while playing so many games this season, especially yesterday where I played for like 6 hours straight, I've been finding a lot of really bad team comps. Now, I know that there have always been bad team comps. Every single season, you're just going to have a chance of having a bad team comp, and especially the lower ranks you go, probably the higher chance of having a bad team comp, or I guess the very highest ranks, because there's a lot of one-tricks. But for everywhere in between, there wasn't way too many terrible team comps, and for the most part, I could get a half-decent team with at least 2 supports every game and 1 tank. But this season, I haven't exactly been able to pull that off every single game. At the start of the season, I personally wanted to become a Doomfist one-trick, played as much as I could, but it's been kind of hard, as this season has had more DPS for me around Diamond and Masters tier than any other season in the past. But with that all in mind, I want to talk to you guys today about what you can do with bad team comps and what you can do with situations that aren't really that great. And I know the best thing, I guess, in Overwatch is to get into a game and have a good team comp and be versus a good team comp, but you can't always expect that. And a lot of the times there are just going to be problems showing up, and today I want to talk about how to maximize your chances of winning with problems. Now, if you are a DPS one trick, these won't really help you that much. I mean, I guess they kind of can, because you can learn how to help your teammates that are trying to fill in and help your team comp, or as well, if you're just a certain one trick of a character, these might be helpful but not as helpful. But mainly if you're a player that just is trying to rank up and is flexing a little bit, this will be for you and kind of show you what you can do with a lot of tanks, especially to help yourself win a lot of games that normally you wouldn't think that you could. Now, we're gonna just pretend right now that you're in a game, you can log right in and then there's an insta lock for DPS, and then someone insta locks into Reinhardt. That's not the best situation. I think we can all agree, probably not what you want to be seeing every single game of Overwatch. But if that does happen, what I'm going to say in a situation like this right now, you probably want to lock in Mercy and play Mercy. Especially if you don't have any tanks. If it's just 5 DPS and you're the last pick, I know you might want to play DPS, or I know that you might want to play like Lucio or Zenyatta, or maybe even just another tank. But really, Mercy is just so strong right now. Mercy can win teamfights by herself. Mercy can heal her entire team at the same time for 20 seconds, which is really good when you're trying to flex and when there's no one else healing your team. And overall, I wish I didn't have to say this, because personally, I don't like playing Mercy that much, but she's my most played hero this season just because team cons have been so awkward that that's been kind of showing up for me. I know in a lot of ranks there's a ton of Mercy mains and a ton of Mercy one tricks, but where I am, I'm not really finding any. But I mean, if that's kind of how the match is going, I'd probably recommend to play her. But let's pretend that you are in a better match where you have already 2 supports, who really cares who they are, and then 3 DPS, and then yourself. Because that's kind of how it's going to go for the most part. I've had a few games where there are just a truckload of tank mains, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And we're going to mainly focus on having too many DPS, because that's what I feel like is the main problem. But anyways, back to the scenario. 3 DPS mains, 2 support mains on your team. What should you go and who should you play? Well, this is kind of the guideline that I'm going to give you that I personally use when trying to figure out what to play. Now, first off, if I just want to play Diva for that day, which often I'm trying to do, maybe I'll just play Diva. But if she stops working, these are the characters that I'm going to switch to. And I'd say if you're a tank main that likes to play a certain tank, play that tank until it stops working and then switch to one of these. So let's say that you have a team with some characters like Junkrat, McCree, Soldier, Widowmaker, Hanzo, even Anna, characters that do a lot of long-range damage, a little slower than the other characters, and really need some time to hide behind a shield. Well, I'm going to say go Orisa. And I'm also going to say that you probably shouldn't be playing Reinhardt in this situation. While Reinhardt can work, I feel like he's especially strong when played with another tank, because Diva can finish off kills that Reinhardt can get pretty low, and of course combo really well with the ultimate. Zarya just gets a lot of charge off of Reinhardt, and Reinhardt overall just needs someone to kind of back him up once his shield goes down. But with Orisa, you don't really need that as much. You can kind of just walk up, put your shield down, have people play behind it, and when your shield dies, they all walk away, and you put down another one and just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. There's not as much wait time in between, and overall, it's a lot easier for your teammates to just get kind of used to your positioning, and that's what I'm going to recommend for you guys to go. And for the most part, you should just be trying to wait, push very slowly, and hope that somebody can eventually get a pick on your team. Don't try to rush away too fast with this team comp. It's not going to work that well for you. I'm going to say, in these situations, let's say that you have like a Junkrat and McCree and then a Genji, I'd probably still go Orisa. But let's say that we're on the other side of the coin, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Let's say you have a Genji Tracer and a Junkrat, then I'd probably go the other character I'm going to talk about. Just pick the character based on the majority of your DPS, I'm going to say right there. So let's say it is in the flip situation right now, and now you have a Reaper, Genji, Tracer, Doomfist, Sombra, other characters like that that like to flank a little bit, that like to dive in. Well, you should probably go Winston. And I feel like you can say that maybe in this situation you could go D.Va if you're very good at her, and you know, it can work for yourself, but D.Va's kind of awkward because she's not really as much of a frontline tank that plays by herself. She's more of like a right next to the front line that tries to finish off kills and do stuff like that. But I mean, you can go her if you want to. But with Winston, he's very strong with these picks. All you got to do is call out a dive and go in. And in esports, a lot of times they'll actually just play a single tank Winston with these different dive characters because you have more damage, you have more outplay potential on the enemies, and that can work for you pretty decently well. Now, it is going to be harder, and I'm going to say playing dive comp with only one tank is really difficult for yourself, and you have to make sure that your team is ready to go in the second that you call it out. Otherwise, you're just going to die, and that's going to suck for you. And especially if you have only one support, that's going to be even harder for yourself because you are just going to get blown up. So you have to make sure that you're calling it out, and you probably want to call it out even a second before you actually go in so your team goes in on time. That's really important for yourself. But if you go Orisa or Winston in those situations with those characters, I feel like it will maximize the chance that you can win that fight. With Orisa, I don't think you have to use voice cons way too much. If you're a player that doesn't have them, it's okay. But with Winston, I'd really say make sure you're using voice cons, or make sure that you have like some code that your teammates know. Like one of you spam group up with me, I'm gonna dive in, that you've typed in chat already. Do something like that. Otherwise, Winston's just gonna be a big pain to try to figure out in these games. But there you go with that. Those are the characters I'm going to say you probably want to play if you're playing with a really bad team comp, and those are the exact examples. And you can kind of use similar characters to Reaper, you know, whoever else you want to talk about, maybe Torb. That's a bad example, but you know, whatever. But here we are for some other general tips about how you can carry a game with really terrible team comps. And one thing I want to mention is that just because you have a bad team comp does not mean that you've lost that game, and it does not mean that your teammates are bad themselves. Oftentimes, they're very good. So good that they only want to play their favorite character. And if you can just open up the opportunity for them to do as well as they humanly possibly can, that will increase your chance of winning. While if you just went a 4th or 5th DPS, you're pretty much just throwing away the game. And I know that that's a problem, and I wish that that wasn't how it was. I wish there was just some way to queue up so you didn't have this problem, but whatever, that's just kind of how it goes. So what you want to do, just have some general tips. One of them is to again, play to bring the most out of your DPS. So you want to make sure that you either are hard diving with your DPS and you're calling it out, as I was saying earlier, with Orisa, or with Winston, I mean, and all those other diving characters, or you go for someone like Orisa and you go for some picks with maybe Hanzo or Widowmaker, and then you back off, and then you go back for some picks and you back off, and you do that over and over and over again. You don't try to do a consistent push with that character. Just play for what brings the most out of your DPS, and that will increase your chance of winning as high as possible. And essentially, when you're trying to carry these games, you just want to increase the chance of winning as much as you can, because it still will be often pretty good on the shoulders of these DPS players, but I mean, you're doing the best you can. Now, if you do have 3 DPS, another thing you can actually try to do is utilize them to their fullest abilities and play super aggro. Because the good thing about these characters is that they will get out a ton of damage and get out way more damage than the enemy tanks. So, if you can just pull out more damage than the enemies very quickly, you might be able to win that fight. I'm just going to say play aggro and don't try to spam way too much from far range, because they have more tanks to soak up damage, and you don't, so you're probably going to lose if you try to do that. Another thing I want to mention is that if you do want to play like a solo Roadhog, Zarya, or D.Va, you can go for that. If that's your main, that's okay. But I'm going to say that if you start losing, especially with me and D.Va, I would probably switch to Orisa or something, but switch to Winston if the case is fitting like that. Oftentimes you can win with awkward tanks as your main tank if you're really good at them, but if you're just okay at tanks, I'd go the tank that is the easiest to win with that situation. Now, if you're playing with 4 DPS, which really sucks, but 1 support, it still is winnable. Don't give up on the game. I'm going to say just go with shield tank and try to minimize your damage as much as possible. And I'm going to say for the most part, you probably shouldn't even be playing Winston way too much because you just don't have enough healing, unless you really need to get that dive comp. But go Orisa, play around corners, put up your shield, try to survive, try to get damage out. And that's kind of what you can do. And as well, what I've done sometimes, especially on King of the Hill maps, you can just go the second support and play with no tanks, and sometimes you might be able to win. If you do that though, I'm going to say either go Zenyatta or Lucio. Try to get damage boosts, try to get kills, try to speed boost in, try to get kills. Won't always work. For the most part, it might be hard for you, but that increases your chance. And filling overall does increase your chance of winning a lot in these situations. And the final thing I'm going to say about all this is that, no, do not go a 5th carry because you think your team comp is terrible. you're just going to waste your DPS win rates. Your chance of winning that game is like freaking 5% or less unless you're complete god as that character. Even if you are a god, you're not really helping your team much. And yeah, just save your win percents on your good characters for a little bit later. And finally, I'm going to say no. You cannot win every game, but you can increase the chance of winning every game. And you can maybe make yourself go from winning 0% of those games because you just give up to winning 10 or 20 or 30% of those games. And if you do that, well, if you change 50% of your losses down to 40%, well, you can have a pretty good win rate and actually start climbing pretty quickly. So there's the benefit of trying to do this. And as well, each game will be a little harder than playing with a good team comp. I think that should be pretty obvious. But again, you're just trying to maximize your chances. And sometimes a thing I want to mention is that you might get 4 to 5 tank mains or 4 to 5 support mains. And that really sucks. I had that happen to me twice yesterday, and I was one of them. If that happens, going triple tank I think can work really well. And if you guys are just really bad at DPS, going quadra tank or going 3 tank 3 support is a plausible action. I think it's better in a lot of cases than just playing DPS that you're completely terrible at. Especially if you have people like, let's say you have a one-trick Ana, a one-trick Zen, and a one-trick Mercy. I think it should be pretty obvious that you might want to go that. Or again, play quadra tank, which really isn't too bad as long as you have a Mercy and an Ana healing everybody up at the same time. Anyways, that's all I'm going to say about this topic. Again, I wish I could tell you guys how to carry every single game, but these are how to carry them, I guess, to the maximum amount possible that I can think of and that I've personally been using in my own games. And I guess if you have your own opinion about ways that you guys have been trying to carry games, please leave that down in the comment section down below. Now, if you're DPS main, as always, play your DPS and try to hard carry your team no matter how bad they are. You can be a god. There's my tip for that if you have a terrible team comp. Or switch and become a bit more of a flex player, as that'll help the game a lot more for yourself and for your teammates. But whatever, you do you. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like or press that subscribe button, or even maybe press that notification button to see videos like this in the future. Anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching, and have a wonderful day.